I need to tell you, give you a disclosure. Much of the work that I'm going to talk about today has been licensed to a company. I have a small ownership in the company because they insisted. And there's several patents, but the research funding has been from federal agencies with the conflict of interest managed by the University of Missouri to ensure that it's objective research adults. And I want to point out that there are many, many collaborators from faculty, students, and older adult participants that have contributed to this work. So let's begin by talking about aging in place. So this is generally considered to be a concept that means living in the home of your choice as you age. It comes in many flavors. It could be staying in your existing home through the end of life, which my mother was successful in achieving. It could also mean moving into senior living apartments and staying there even if you lose functionality. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. My father had the good graces of being able to achieve that. What do older adults want as they age? Independence and autonomy, the ability to make decisions, to make their own decisions. They want a high quality of life, don't we all? And they want good health. Now, of course, we can't all achieve good health as we age, but they want to at least feel healthy. Especially, they don't want to be reminded of not being healthy. And sometimes that, or oftentimes, that amounts to being able to successfully manage chronic health conditions. So I'm going to tell you some of the work that we had been doing at the University of Missouri. And I got started with this by basically volunteering to talk to one of our nursing professors, Marilyn Rance, who is also a emerita professor now. And by the way, today is Marilyn's birthday. So happy birthday to Marilyn, who started all of this. So what we wanted to do after doing a lot of our own brainstorming was to detect very early signs of health changes using in-home sensors. And we put together a framework for clinical decision support where we had tested a number of different sensors. I'm going to show you today the ones that turned out to be very fruitful. And we sent out health alerts and fall alerts to the nurses and the social workers. This was tested out and originally developed in Tiger Place, which is in Columbia, Missouri. Tiger Place is named after the University of Missouri mascot. And it now has 54 independent living apartments, but they've been designed for aging in place. It's built and operated by a private company, AmeriCare. When they opened 20 years ago, the nursing school at the university was responsible for all the clinical care that has since been passed to AmeriCare. And it functions as a living laboratory for conducting longitudinal studies. All of the residents that moved there consented to have their data used for research purposes. And they did a number of assessments that would not normally be done in independent living. But Tiger Place was a special kind of facility in that they had the ability to let people move into truly independent living apartments. But if you needed services, you could stay there through the end of life. And if you needed extra services, you would pay extra for them, but you could stay in your same apartment. And indeed, this is what happened with my father. When my mother passed, my father ended up moving to Tiger Place. So he was able to live there until the end of his life. So, and here's Marilyn Rance. She was the champion for getting all this stuff started, and we often call her the mother of Tiger Place. So part of our model, if you will, for how this might work is the nurses would tell me that the typical trajectory of aging was a sort of red stair-step fashion, right? You'd go along on a plateau for a while until some big thing happened, and it would drop you down to the next lower level of functionality, and then you'd go along for the next level until the next big thing happened. We had hypothesized that if we could detect the beginning of that decline, or better yet, predict when that decline was likely to occur, that we could provide an intervention that would prevent that lower decline and keep people up at a very high level of functional ability. And so if you achieve this very high level until the end, that's what we called squaring the life curve. And indeed, this is what my mother did, to our amazement, to all of our amazement. And we were able to test this in Tiger Place. The residents at Tiger Place got a lot of really good nursing care because the nursing school was doing their own studies on how they could give, more holistic care coordination to help people as they age. And indeed, that did work very well. But even with that really extraordinarily good care, if we added the sensors onto it that were allowing us to give very early signs of health changes and health problems to allow early interventions, those residents with the sensors were able to stay there 1.7 years longer than the people without the sensors. So indeed, it did work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the sensors that we had developed for this purpose. The first one we're going to talk about is the depth sensor. Now, depth sensor gives you an image, but instead of a color or a grayscale image, you get a distance to the nearest object at that pixel. And so we did some special processing with that to extract what were effectively three-dimensional silhouettes. And here is an example of somebody walking. This is capturing a gait pattern in the home, in an apartment there at Tiger Place. And you can see you get a shape of the individual. A big reason for why this was done was to prevent any privacy problems. People do not want streaming video in their homes. But they were okay with this concept of a silhouette because that you can't tell if you have your makeup or your hair done that day. You can't tell what kind of clothes you're wearing. You can't tell if you're wearing clothes, right? It just gives you that silhouette. But with that shape, you can really see a lot of useful information. So we were able to extract lots of interesting gait parameters. This shows you an example here on the right where we would cluster these gait patterns so we could identify the difference between one person and another person. This came from a two-person apartment. They're husband and wife. The shorter person, there is the wife. This is plotting walking speed over height. So the shorter person was the wife, and the taller, slightly taller person was the husband. And they had a lot of grandchildren that would come into the scene, and so we have a lot of these short people over here, which were the grandchildren. And then we would cluster these to be able to track the cluster centers and watch for changes over time, so you can independently see what's going on in the home. And this particular example was very crucial because they originally moved there because the wife had Parkinson's. As we observed their trajectories over time, her pattern was constant. She was under medication and was able to control it very well. It was the husband's, presumably the healthy husband's, pattern that changed. And we saw his gait pattern, his walking speed decline. And in particular, it declined because he was taking shorter strides, which was a sign of cognitive impairment. And so they were able to detect that he was declining in his cognition and thus care for this couple in a more holistic manner that was pertinent to the couple and his now the husband's condition as well. So we can track the walking speed, which also aligns with the fall risk. Now I'm going to show you some examples from my father. Here's an example of declining walking speed and a fall. While after studying this for many years, we were able to determine that if you decline in your walking speed by 5 centimeters a second over 7 days, there's an 86% probability that you're going to fall within the next 3 weeks. Now, we're hoping that we can expand that out to give you more time, but that gives you a time period that you can go in with an intervention to try to do something to prevent the fall. But you can see here, this was indeed my father's case. So we got an alert for a walking speed change, and he fell about 3 weeks later or so. I'll show you the fall risk that goes along with that. Now, because we've done this for many years, and we also correlated it with a set of standardized fall risk assessments, the one that turned out to be the most powerful was the timed up and go assessment, what they call the TUG. And we were able to actually correlate average in-home walking speed as it's connected, as it's detected by the depth sensors in the home with this standardized assessment, the TUG score. And that has been done on so many people that they have stratified, low, medium, and high levels of fall risk. Well, indeed, Dad was in a very high fall risk category in that red zone. So it wasn't so surprising that he fell. Let me show you what the fall looks like. So maybe you can see what happened here. He was trying to sit down in his chair, and he missed. Luckily, he didn't get hurt here, and he was able to get back up and get back in his chair. But when these falls are detected, a short depth video clip is extracted and sent out with an immediate alert so that the people that are receiving it can see exactly what happened. Sometimes there are false alarms. Sometimes pets jump off the couch. They have pets at Tiger Place. And little dogs and cats do all kinds of strange things. So you can tell the difference. Actually, little kids that come into the scene are just hilarious. The small kids sometimes throw themselves on the floor. And they generate very high confidence fall alarms. But you can immediately see that it's not an older adult. It's a small child. But I got an alert for this. I got a text message on my phone with a link to a depth video, and so I saw it. Now the staff at Tiger Place saw this, and they immediately went down and made sure he was okay. My husband and I happened to be just leaving the movie theater on a Sunday evening, and we went over to Tiger Place right away, and we walk in his apartment and I said, Dad, well, first of all, he says, what are you doing here? Because we didn't normally come over late on a Sunday evening. And I said, Dad, you fell. And he said, you saw that? I said, yeah, Dad, remember, you've got this depth sensor here? And then I showed it to him. Well, so a couple days later, he was complaining about his neck hurting. And so I took him to the doctor. Well, the first thing they ask you is, if you bring a 97-year-old into the doctor, the first thing they ask you is, have you fallen lately? And I said, yes, he fell on August 12th at 9:02 p.m., and here's the video. And the doctor played it over. Usually I get a laugh at that. How many videos do you actually see of actual falls? I mean, really. But actually, I didn't get a laugh out of the doctor either. He looked at it very carefully. At one point, he grabs my phone out of my hand. He replays the video many times. And he says, well, maybe he got whiplash on his neck. They did an x-ray of his neck. He gave us a whole list of things that may end up happening as a result of this. He says, if any of these things happen, be sure and bring him in right away. Luckily, he didn't have any repercussions of it other than a sore neck. But it was the first time that I was able to see that this could actually be used for diagnosis, to help with the diagnosis problem. Or you could also use it to look for trip hazards. What is it that's causing this? One of the residents at Tiger Place had a cat, and she fell many, many times. Her family wanted to get rid of the cat because they thought she was tripping on the cat. We looked through all of the fall videos. She never once tripped on the cat. So we were able to save her cat. We convinced the family that no, she's not tripping on the cat. So everybody was happy. That was a win-win. Except we never could really figure out how to prevent her falling. But she didn't get hurt. She didn't break anything. So let me switch gears and I'll show you the bed sensor that we have. So this, there are many bed sensors that are on the market now, and they are non-contact sensors. I'm sure they work very similarly to this. We had actually developed our own because we wanted the raw signals, and nobody would give us the raw signals. But the way this works is that these are transducers that go underneath the mattress. There's absolutely no contact. It gives you the superposition of the respiration signal and the ballistocardiogram, which is the effect of the blood flowing through the cardiovascular system. So you're all probably familiar with the ECG, the electrocardiogram. I have an illustration of that here. The ballistocardiogram somewhat mirrors that. As the valves open up, as a result of the electrical activity, the blood flows into the arteries, and that creates this ballistic effect. And you can pick that up with a non-contact bed sensor that's positioned under the mattress. My colleague now, Giovanna Guidoboni, has developed a cardiovascular model that models all of this. And with that, we're also using it to extract other information as well, blood pressure changes, stroke volume changes, and so forth. But it's really relatively easy to get heart rate and respiration rate out of this because you just do some simple signal processing. You can also get bed restlessness, and I'll show you an example of how that plays out very usefully too. This is a density map of the bed restlessness over time. At the top, it starts at midnight, and at the bottom, it goes to 11 p.m. And so it's blocked out in hour segments. And the color indicates the amount of restlessness in the bed. The more colorful part of the graph is a higher level of restlessness. Well, indeed, we got so this is my father. We had my mother and father's house in Brookings, South Dakota, outfitted with these sensors. I can say Brookings here because you might actually know where that is. When I talk about that in California, they have no idea. But we literally installed this sensor system in my mom and dad's house on my mother's 93rd birthday. And this happened while they were still there. We got an alert leading, is actually about 6 weeks before my father had a pneumonia diagnosis. Now, I was receiving the alerts. I didn't know what to do with this. But mom was paying attention, and she knew something was up, and she got dad to the hospital, to the clinic, to get it checked. And indeed, he had pneumonia diagnosis. But he was able to recover from this at the age of 96 without having to go into the hospital. So I have to believe that it was a pretty early catch on his pneumonia. But the sensors actually alerted 6 weeks before the pneumonia diagnosis. If somebody had been paying attention to that, we could maybe have gotten him in even sooner. But just something simple like this, like bed restlessness, was very powerful. And that has shown to be a really powerful indicator. We also look at motion density from motion sensors. And this has the same kind of density map where it starts at midnight at the top and goes to 11 p.m. at the bottom. The black regions here indicate time outside of the apartment. So this is a case that shows 3 snapshots of a person who had depression. And you can see at the beginning, the depression was managed. They were going out of the apartment for the meals in the common dining area. When the depression worsened, this individual had some personal losses. There was hardly any motion at all, and they hardly ever left the apartment. And then after an intervention, they were able to go back to a more normal level for the individual. We try not to say normal in a broad population-based method. The alerts are really based on individualized pattern. So we learn what is normal for an individual, and then we look for changes in that individualized normal. And that's how we determine whether an alert is warranted. So these have really presented some great opportunities for early interventions. As I've shown, you can catch things like increasing fall risk, you can catch things like depression and other health-related problems for this. So for a time we decided, well, if this is working so well in Tiger Place, let's take it outside of Tiger Place into private homes, and let's try to use it for self-management of health in independent housing. So we did this where the health messages were being sent to the older adults themselves and also to the family members. So this is a picture of mom and dad in their home, which is why I'm listed there. I'm shown there as the family member. And we had also developed this elaborate voice assistant platform and web interface for being able to do this. So we used the Amazon Alexa, Amazon Echo Show, so you could talk to Alexa, and you could say, Alexa, what's my fall risk today? Or Alexa, how did I sleep last night? Or Alexa, what are my recent trends or whatever? And it would talk back to them in linguistic. We had a whole way of converting this to linguistic descriptions so that they could use it. The problem was, although people saw the value of the sensors, they really didn't know how to interpret the data or the health messages. So we went to step 3, which is using sensor-based care coordination that's remotely delivered. So this is now a current study that's being run by my colleague, Rachel Profit, in the occupational therapy department. And she connects up people in the home, and this is being conducted in rural communities where we know that they oftentimes have greatly reduced access to healthcare services. So she connects them up with a nurse, an occupational therapist, and a social worker, depending on what their needs are. And they use the in-home sensors to help drive this care coordination, but they're able to help them achieve various goals, and if they want to try and improve their health, or at least to manage their chronic health conditions. It's still in place. It's actually a randomized control trial. We don't have the results yet, but the study is getting close to finishing, and we hope to get some results out of that soon. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the importance of physical activity. It's great to monitor these people, but we don't want them just sitting around, and I'll tell you why. So you can probably imagine that if you have low physical activity, that can give you an increased risk for poor cardiovascular health, which then gives you a higher risk of physical health problems. But you may not realize that that also gives you a risk of cognitive health problems. And so if you have better cardiovascular health, you have a lower risk of physical health problems, and you have a lower risk of cognitive health problems. And don't we all want that? So here's what you need to do: more physical activity, keep working, or at least keep engaged in something that gives you purpose for your life, social engagement, reduce inflammation, which oftentimes means stress, reducing the stress. So we were thinking about this. So if you want to promote cardiovascular health by doing all of these things, is there a way that smart home technology can help with that? So I've been teaching this class called Architectural Robotics for the last several years at the University of Missouri. Does anybody, do you guys have a class here in Architectural Robotics? No? Okay. Well, if you're interested, come talk to me because I'd love to share the concept. I didn't develop it. So I'm going to give you just a couple of ideas. These are project ideas. Now, keep in mind, these were done by students, mostly undergraduate students. And they were sort of short-term projects within the course of a semester. And this was not the only project they had to do over the course of the semester. So one of the concepts, because I really tried to push the students to think of this in terms of, let's not give people an excuse for not moving, right? We want to try to keep them as active and functional as much as they can. If they have the ability to move, let's make sure that they move. Let's encourage them to move. So one of the concepts was this adaptive shower system. So it automates a lot of this stuff, but only if people need it. So it looks at the health history and then today's health status from the sensor system, from a sensor system. I mean, it could be other sensors, but some kind of a sensor system. And then controls various aspects of the shower with a automatic shower curtain and adjustable shower head and a chair that helps people get there, but only if they need it, right? So there has to be some assessment of what sorts of structures they would need. That was one concept. A couple of other project ideas that came out. There was a smart toilet seat that provides just enough help to help people get up off of the toilet. So you probably are all familiar with those recliner chairs that help people up. They have a one-size-fits-all, right? They basically propel people out of the chair. Well, so this was not to make a one-size solution for everybody, but to sense how much pressure people were applying using both the sensors on the arms as well as the sensor. There was a sensor pad on the floor, and I've sort of highlighted them there. Now, this was a very simple project. They 3D printed a tiny toilet and some other mechanism that would lift it up. But these are all implemented with Arduinos, microcontrollers and real sensors and motors, and so they had to create an actual system for it. But it's hard to see in this picture, but this is actually a picture of showing the toilet seat lifting up. It has sort of a scissor-like mechanism to lift people up, but only giving people as much help as they needed. So it didn't give them an excuse for not moving or not helping themselves. The other one that I thought was interesting was this force-based doorknob assistance. I don't have a picture of that, but it now this, I know that today we have doorknobs that have lever arms, right? Those are a lot easier for older adults to manipulate. But imagine a doorknob that is circular and you have to squeeze it to be able to turn it, to be able to open the door. And so their idea was that there were sensors on the doorknob that actually captured the grip strength. And based on how much effort somebody was using and applying, it would give you assistance to open up the door or not. Now, one thing I really like about this idea is that it also allowed you to monitor the grip strength for somebody, because that's oftentimes a parameter that's used for capturing somebody's frailty over time. And so this is sort of a monitoring and assistance kind of thing together. And maybe it could be applied on other things because, honestly, the lever bar is a lot easier. But still, it's an interesting concept, and I present it to sort of give you some ideas of what sorts of things could be done. So this course idea, Architectural Robotics, was initially started by Keith Green, the architect, and Ian Walker, the engineer at Clemson University. Dr. Green is now at Cornell and leads an architectural robotics lab at Cornell. But there's actually a book out that he wrote, and so if you're interested in doing that at all here, I'd be happy to share what I've been doing. You notice that my title is Emerita. I retired in September, so I'm no longer teaching this class. This is the first year I haven't taught this class in I don't know how long. It's kind of sad. But I'd love to pass it on to somebody else. It's a really fun class to teach. So I also want to talk about our recent development with the Center to Stream Healthcare in Place. Now, this is an NSF-funded IUCRC, which is an industry university cooperative research center. There are now 6 university sites that are part of this center. You can see that's why we have a very colorful logo. Baylor College of Medicine, University of Arizona, University of Southern California, Caltech, University of Missouri, and University of North Dakota. And there are now about 20 industry members that are part of this. And so we collectively work on project ideas together, and there are some benefits to the companies because they get, number one, they get a low overhead, but they also get a license-free access to the IP that comes out of this, which is a real benefit for them. If there are any company partners here who are interested in this, let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. By the way, we have a think tank session every Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. Central Time, which is delivered via Zoom. If you go to c2ship.org, you can find the information about the agenda, and there's a link there. And so everybody is welcome to join. And we have a variety of different either industry people that connect and that give talks, or some of the students or the faculty at the various academic partners will give talks. So it's a really interesting, lively kind of group. So I'm going to show you one of the projects that came out of this at the University of Missouri. This is being done by my colleague, Zheng Yan. Multimodal sensing integrated with mobility aids for wireless monitoring of dehydration in older adults. Ever since I've known Marilyn, she kept harping on dehydration sensing. It's like, you must have dehydration sensing because older adults lose the urge of thirst. So we were trying to figure out how to do this in a way that might be useful for them. Now, Zheng has been working on these flexible patches. So these are patches that were originally designed to go on the skin. But we know older adults have skin sensitivities, and we thought, could we put it on something else that they would make contact with, and then be able to sense it that way? And so he's been investigating this idea of putting it on the handle of a walker. But indeed, it could be put on many other things, too, that they make contact with. I'm going to zoom in to show you the sensor, because there's a lot of sensors that are included as part of this. For the dehydration, we wanted ions. There's potassium and sodium ions. But there's some other stuff here, too. There's galvanic skin resistance sensors. There's ECG. There's a temperature sensor. So indeed, there's a glucose sensor. I don't know how the heck he does that. But it's a suite of sensors that could be capturing important information very passively, and if it can be structured on something that the older adult makes contact with, then it could be very seamlessly included into their environment. So as I said, it can be put on the skin or other objects and make contact with the skin. So that's just one example of one of our C2SHIP projects. So I want to finish up with some challenges for the architects and designers. Certainly, you want good design for older adults, which means you want to ensure safety with grab bars and no steps, seamless flooring, zero entry showers, lots of light. And I've shown a picture here from Tiger Place to show you what they've done there for some of this. These grab bars that they have in the hallway look like chair rails. They're seamlessly in the environment, but they're always there, ready if people need to grab on something. There's also light tunnels that go through the attic, sort of solar tubes, that gives you lots of natural light in the hallways. And so it also gives it or let's say reduces the sort of institutional look to it. It doesn't look like certainly it doesn't look like a skilled nursing home, doesn't look like an assisted living home. It looks like, I don't know, almost like a hotel or something, or fancy apartment building maybe. But it really gives you a nice lift to the environment. So the other thing that I checked with some of my nursing colleagues recently, and this was their comment. Baby boomers want what they want. Apparently, we are picky. My husband will tell you that. My husband's sitting back there. He tells me I'm picky all the time. So they want it to look good. They have personal controls for heat and air conditioning in their apartments at Tiger Place, right? They want that. They have other amenities like exercise spaces, a sports bar, movie theater. They have a vet clinic for the pets that are also aging along with the older adults. There's an adjacent AmeriCare facility for rehab that has a pool, and all the Tiger Place residents can go use that. There's a nice little bridge over to that space. The other challenge that I would give to you all is to include the flexibility to support new technology that will likely be developed for the future. One of the things that they did in Tiger Place was they made an attic area that was quite big. It's very walkable. We would climb up there all the time, actually. It's got lighting, it's got power. It makes it very easy to do retrofit for the technology. And in fact, when we started out, we would just put a computer on the floor next to a power outlet and plug it in. And we thought, behind a couch in an unobtrusive way, and we thought, okay, that should be fine. And what we found is that the residents there did not have the concept of 24/7 monitoring. And they would look at the computer there plugged into the outlet, and they would say, I'm not using that right now. And they would unplug it, and they'd plug in their vacuum cleaner. And so needless to say, that created a problem with the 24/7 monitoring. So we ended up retrofitting the spaces and actually putting in a dedicated cabinet above the refrigerator, which they were not able or likely to manipulate, to mess with. And it had network ports and power and everything, so all the computer stuff was hidden. But this was back when we were using really big honking computers. Now we have little tiny ones. We don't need that. But it did make it easy to be able to do these tests. And the other thing I will say is to make the technology unobtrusive and, if possible, hidden, so that people don't see it, because they don't want the concept of being surveyed, like a surveillance kind of a thing. I mean, they want the security, they especially love the fall detection stuff, but they don't want to be reminded that they're not healthy. I guess that's sort of the bottom line. So making this stuff hidden for them and unobtrusive is very nice. So I have one more set of challenges for you all. So my husband and I are now in our 70s, and we are considering building a new home, or at least moving to be closer to our granddaughter. And these are my challenges: low maintenance and low energy footprint, of course, in addition to all that other stuff, for my retirement home. So if you have some ideas, come talk to me. And finally, I'll just finish with this. This is Mom and Dad in their home. They were 90-something. They were probably 92 and 95 or something in that picture. But I want to thank all of our faculty and student collaborators, the older adult study participants, and I guess I have to thank Mom and Dad for this too, because they were our study participants as well, and the funding agencies. So thank you very much. Hopefully we have time for a couple questions.
Wonderful. Questions? getting better at wanting to monitor themselves too. In other words, the whole heart thing on the iPhone. You know, how many steps did I take? I live in a co-housing community with 21 seniors, and they're constantly checking their phone. How many steps did I take today? How many steps did I take today? And they don't stop until they walk around until they get 10,000 steps. It seems like people we're into the measuring and counting era, and you're leading it. That's great, but I'm not sure that you have to hide it from the participants. I think they want to. I think you can very likely enhance their participation.
So how old are they?
They are basically 65 to 85.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I would say that the average age of our participants was probably at least 85.
Mm-hmm.
So we were looking at maybe an older population. Maybe they weren't as
Proactive.
they weren't as physically fit.
Mm.
Maybe they'd gotten to the point where they weren't in the realm of doing this. And granted, if you look at the dates on those papers, they were a little bit, but some of them were 10 years old. So maybe things have shifted. But I think it does make a difference what sort of age range you're looking at. And as the baby boomers get older, and now we've been used to doing this, like, you know, we all carry smartphones in our pocket, right? I remember my mother asked me when she was about 93 or 94, she said, "Hey, Marge, do you think I should get a smartphone?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, Mom." You know, she had a flip phone for making phone calls. I said, "I don't know, Mom. Do you think you'd really use it that much?" And so in the end, we decided that she probably didn't need one. But she was very big on computers, and my dad was an engineering professor. He wasn't afraid. They weren't afraid of technology. But I can tell you towards the end of his life, Dad couldn't even keep a watch on, like a smart watch or anything. Mm-hmm. He couldn't keep one on, and he probably would have had a hard time with a smartphone. But maybe that will shift, you know, as this population starts to get older. I had a gerontologist, an MD colleague, tell me that when people got to be 80-something, they did whatever they wanted to. Mm-hmm. When they got to be 90-something, they did it with an attitude. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, I could definitely see that with my mother. When she hit 90, it's like, "Lou, we're not going to go play music anymore. I'm tired of dragging these drums around." Mm-hmm. And Lou, we're not going to do the garden anymore because I'm tired of weeding in the heat. You know, she got an attitude about it. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens as this group ages.
The cardiovascular slide is very convincing, and that makes me think about preventive care more than anything else. You know, the three subsequent conditions come from cardiovascular behavior, activity, or not. And so I think we need to lower that number from 85 to 95 to 65 to 80, so that people can be more proactive.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you.
All right, one more question here, and then we'll go over.
Thank you.
So thanks for the presentation. I strongly believe that image-based sensing is the future for many reasons, because it's the most unobtrusive form, and as artificial intelligence advances, we can also make sure that there's no human element involved in the analysis of this data. And you showed a very interesting study with depth sensors. And I was wondering, since most depth sensors in the market, we have been working with them as well in my group, they are also RGB sensors at the same time. And they can provide a perfect image if we wanted to. How can you tackle this issue of privacy when you want to get this approved in a real-world facility, as you did?
Well, I can tell you that this company that licensed our technology, Foresight Healthcare, they have commercialized this, and they are selling these systems actually internationally. And they have their own depth sensor system that they have developed. They've gone through different iterations of it. The current version of it actually goes in the ceiling, so kind of like a light fixture. But they've got their own depth sensor. I mean, they have, obviously they didn't develop the depth sensor, but they bought a depth sensor that's just the depth sensor at whatever resolution they deemed was important to have. And it's got the computational element, it's got the Wi-Fi connection. And so, yeah,
So
I mean, it's designed to work kind of like this. In fact, if you looked at that, Eric Stone was the grad student who developed most of that, and he now works for Foresight Healthcare, and so they're continuing to develop it. But,
so if I got correctly, the device is limited intentionally, so it doesn't provide.
Right.
Okay, I see.
Right, exactly, yeah. And I guess they don't have problems convincing people that this is the case, but they don't. They at the current time, they're not targeting private homes. They're targeting senior housing facilities, assisted living, memory care, and so forth. And so they try to work with the housing development so that it becomes part of the entire facility.
I'm curious with the dehydration sensors, if those are calibrated per person or if they can be used more generically, like a test a nurse would take into different rooms within a senior living community.
Yeah, so that's a good question. We haven't gotten to the point of actually testing it with older adults. Right now, it's just been tested with younger healthy adults, meaning grad students. So those are some details that we need to work out with it. And maybe it's a version that does both. I mean, or maybe you have two versions where it can be designed to work specifically with an individual, in which case it might be the same issue of tracking changes, like what is the normal for that individual, and then track changes, versus something that could be used diagnostically the way you would use it in a clinic, for instance. But they are testing it against known levels of these ions. I think their goal is to make it useful for everybody, but I don't know whether we will be able to achieve that perfectly.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.